The papers made a sound Chloe hadn't expected. Not dramatic, not final, just a soft slap of paper against glass as she set the folder down on Yu-Jun Han's desk. And for one terrible second, that quiet was worse than any argument they'd ever had. 31 floors below, Seoul moved the way it always did. Taxis threading through Gangnam traffic, neon starting to flicker awake against a graying sky. Up here, nothing moved at all. Yu-Jun didn't look up right away. He finished the line he was reading on his tablet, set it face down with the same unhurried precision he used for everything, and only then reached for the folder. Chloe watched his eyes move across the first page. Not fast, not slow. He read every word like he was memorizing it for later. Chloe. He said her full name, and she felt the floor tilt slightly, because he never called her that unless something in him had already broken. Don't, she said. Her voice came out steadier than she felt. Don't do the calm thing. Not this time. He closed the folder, set his hand flat on top of it, like he could keep the words from spreading if he just pressed hard enough. Sit down, Chloe. I'm not sitting down. I'm not... She stopped herself, because her hands were shaking, and she hated that they were shaking, and she hated more that he'd notice. He always noticed. Say something, June. Say anything. He reached under the lip of the desk instead. One motion. Practiced, like breathing. The lights changed first. A shift so small she almost missed it, the overheads dimming half a shade as something else took priority on the building's power grid. Then came the sound she would never fully get out of her head, a low mechanical groan running through the walls, floor by floor, followed by the unmistakable thunk of 100 locks engaging at once. Down the hallway, someone screamed, not in terror yet, just startled confusion, and a junior analyst's voice cracked over the intercom. All personnel! Headquarters is now in lockdown. Please remain calm and proceed to your nearest safe zone. Through the glass wall of Yu-Jun's office, Chloe watched the elevator doors, the ones she'd ridden up in 11 minutes ago, seal shut mid-floor with a hydraulic hiss, red light blinking above them like a held breath. Executives froze in the open-plan floor below, phones half raised. A woman near the printer put both hands over her mouth. What did you do? It wasn't a question anymore. Yu-Jun stood. He was very still, the way he got when the danger wasn't in the room yet, but he already knew its shape. I just saved your life. That's it? That's what I get? She laughed, short and disbelieving, the sound scraping her own throat on the way out. I hand you divorce papers, and you seal me inside a building like I'm evidence, like I'm something you own. Chloe, no, I want you to hear this part. Her voice shook now, finally, all the steadiness gone. I have spent 3 years waiting for you to choose me over whatever it is you never explain, and you just proved every single thing I already suspected. You don't protect me because you love me, you protect me because I'm yours. He didn't argue. That was the worst part. He never argued, and his silence had a gravity that made her feel like she was the one being unreasonable, even when she knew she wasn't. I can't explain right now, he said. You never can. Somewhere down the hall, a bodyguard she recognized, Yu-Jun, the quiet one who always held the elevator for her, jogged past the glass wall with his hand pressed to his earpiece, jaw tight in a way she'd never seen on him. Even he looked confused. Even the people paid to know everything about this building didn't know why the man at the center of it had just sealed every exit with his own wife standing 3 feet from his desk. That was the question that would follow Chloe through everything that came next. Not is he a monster, she'd stopped believing that a long time ago, somewhere underneath the anger. The real question, the one that kept her chest tight for the next several hours, was smaller and far more dangerous. What does he know that he'd rather trap me than tell me? Welcome to Afro-Korean Story World. Every story here is written from scratch for this channel, never recycled, never templated. Tonight we're sitting inside a marriage that looks broken from the outside and looks like something else entirely once you get close enough to see what silence has been protecting. This one's about the difference between a man who stopped loving his wife and a man who never learned how to say he was terrified of losing her. If you're watching this from your car, your kitchen, curled up somewhere at the end of a long day, Drop your city and what time it is where you are. I like knowing who's here with me for this one. Now, back into that locked building, because Chloe's about to find out exactly how far Yu-Jun Han will go to keep her breathing. 3 years earlier, Yu-Jun Han did not know how to be quiet. That was the version of him Chloe fell for, the one who got hopelessly lost trying to walk her home from a rooftop bar in Manhattan because he refused to admit he didn't know the subway, the one who laughed too loud at her terrible puns and didn't care who turned to look, the one who carried her heels in one hand for 6 blocks after she complained her feet hurt, insisting the whole way that this was, and he quote, the most heroic thing I have ever done in my life. She'd asked him once, early on, half joking, what he actually did for work. He'd smiled, the real one, the one that reached his eyes, and said, something boring, investments. She believed him for exactly 4 months. The wedding had been small, which surprised everyone who assumed a Han would marry in front of 500 guests and a press release. Yu-Jun hadn't wanted an audience. He'd wanted, he told her the night before, just the people who actually know us. Chloe remembered crying at that, not from sadness, from the sheer relief of being chosen by someone who seemed to want her, not the idea of her. And then, somewhere in the first year, he started disappearing. Not physically, he still came home, usually late, usually quiet. But something behind his eyes checked out the moment he crossed their threshold, like he was leaving pieces of himself in the building he'd just left. Their first anniversary, he canceled with 4 words texted from an unknown number. Something came up. Sorry. She'd sat at a restaurant in Cheongdam, in a dress she'd bought specifically for that night, watching other couples toast each other, and told herself it was a one-time thing. It wasn't. He stopped talking about children the moment she brought it up seriously. Not a hard no. Worse, a soft, evasive pivot every single time, until she learned to stop asking. He hired 2 more security guards for her car without discussing it with her first. When she confronted him, he'd said only, "It's necessary," and refused to elaborate, and something in her had gone cold and small at how easily he dismissed her, right to know why her own life had just gotten more complicated. Every gesture he'd once made freely, the surprise flowers, the handwritten notes tucked into her coat pockets, the ridiculous voice messages he used to leave just to make her laugh on hard days, dried up, one by one, until what remained was a man who came home, ate dinner in near silence, and disappeared into his office until she fell asleep without him. She didn't know, because he never told her, that every canceled anniversary corresponded to a credible threat flagged by his security team. She didn't know the 2 new guards were assigned the week an informant mentioned her name in a conversation about the Han family that should never have included her at all. She didn't know that every time he pulled away from a conversation about children, it was because the idea of bringing a child into a world where men were actively hunting his wife made something in his chest close like a fist. All she knew was what it felt like from the inside, a slow, silent erosion of a marriage she used to be so sure of. And so, on a Tuesday morning in April, after 36 letters she'd written and never sent, number 37 sitting finished on her nightstand, Chloe had finally stopped writing and started walking, straight to his office, with the 1 letter she'd let herself finish. She didn't know yet that she'd been protected by every single thing that had felt, to her, like abandonment. The lockdown held for 11 minutes before Yu-Jun's head of security, a wiry man named Min-ho who'd worked for the Han family since before Yu-Jun could legally drink, pushed through the office door without knocking, tablet already in hand. "Sir, we have confirmation." "Show me." Yu-Jun's voice had dropped into a register Chloe had heard maybe twice in 3 years. Flat, precise, entirely without warmth. Not cruelty. Focus. Min-ho turned the tablet. Grainy security footage, time-stamped from 11 minutes earlier, showed 2 men in maintenance overalls entering the service elevator of the building directly across the street, a building with a clean sightline into Yu-Jun's private floor. Neither of them was on any maintenance roster. A third feed, pulled from a drone Min-ho's team had launched the moment the lockdown triggered, showed the interior of an office on the 14th floor of that same building, abandoned, dust-sheeted furniture, and propped against the window frame, wrapped in a black case that had been unzipped just enough to confirm what it was. A sniper rifle, angled toward the exact corner office where Chloe was standing. The air left her lungs in one motion. Oh my God. Yu-Jun didn't react the way she expected. No panic, no vindication in his expression at being proven right. If anything, his jaw tightened like this was a fear he'd been carrying so long it had become part of his skeleton. How long has that been staged? 2 days, minimum. Whoever it is, they're patient. Minho's eyes flicked to Chloe, then back. Sir, if she'd left the building at her normal time. I know. 2 words, but they landed like a confession. Yu-Jun crossed to the window, not to look out. The blinds were already sealed, but because standing still had become unbearable. Pull every camera in a 6-block radius. I want faces. Chloe found her voice, thin and shaking. Someone was going to shoot me. Yes. Today. Right now. While I was standing in your office yelling at you about... She couldn't even finish the sentence. Everything she'd said 10 minutes ago replayed itself, suddenly grotesque in its smallness against what had actually been happening. June. Why? Why would someone want me dead? He turned from the window, and for the first time since she'd walked in with the papers, she saw something crack across his composure. Not fear for himself, she understood instantly, but fear of the answer he wasn't ready to give her. I don't know all of it yet, he said, and it was, she'd learn much later, the first fully honest thing he'd said to her in over a year. But I will find out, before I let you leave this building. That's not an answer. It's the only one I have right now. She wanted to scream at him. She wanted to shake him until the truth fell out. But underneath the anger, something colder had settled into her chest, and it took her a long moment to name it. Not betrayal anymore. Terror. Someone, somewhere in this city, had been planning to end her life today, and the man she'd just tried to divorce was the only reason she was still breathing to be furious with him about it. The mystery hadn't dissolved. It had simply changed shape. It was no longer, why is he locking me in? It was, who wants me gone? And why has he never told me I was ever in danger at all? Minho's team moved through the building floor by floor, and Chloe watched it happen through the glass, like she was watching someone else's life get inventoried. A woman from accounting was escorted, hyperventilating, into a reinforced conference room. 2 men she didn't recognize, real maintenance staff, badges checked twice, were cleared and sent to wait with the others. Every few minutes, Minho's voice crackled through Yu-Jun's earpiece with another fragment. A license plate that didn't match its registration. A delivery van that had been parked in the loading dock 11 minutes too long. A name flagged in a watch list that made Yu-Jun's jaw tighten and say nothing at all. You're not telling me everything, Chloe said, watching his face instead of the chaos outside the glass. I'm telling you everything I'm certain of. He didn't look away from her when he said it, which was somehow worse than if he had. I've learned the hard way what happens when I hand someone a theory instead of a fact. Theories get people killed just as easily as guns do. That sounds like something you tell yourself so you never have to be wrong out loud. He absorbed that, the way he absorbed most things that landed too close to true, with stillness and a small, almost imperceptible exhale, like he was setting the words down somewhere to deal with later. Maybe, he admitted, I've had a long time to build reasons for the way I do this. Outside, the drone footage looped again on a secondary monitor. The sniper case, with the 2 men in stolen overalls, now frozen and circled in red by an analyst cross-referencing facial recognition against a database Chloe didn't ask about. One of the faces returned a partial match. Minho read the name aloud, low enough that Chloe almost missed it. A known enforcer, last confirmed active in Busan 18 months ago, tied loosely, the analyst stressed loosely, to a syndicate that had gone quiet after a leadership change nobody outside the underworld had noticed. That's not local, Yu-Jun said, more to himself than anyone. Someone brought him in specifically, which means whoever's behind this didn't improvise. They planned for weeks, minimum. Weeks? Chloe repeated. The word sat strangely in her mouth. So this isn't about today. This isn't about the divorce papers. No. His eyes found hers, and for a moment the mask slipped enough that she saw something close to dread underneath it. This was coming regardless of what you put on my desk this morning. The papers just happened to land the same day someone decided to move. By the second hour of lockdown, headquarters had settled into a strange, contained rhythm, analysts working in hushed clusters, security rotating through checkpoints with rehearsed efficiency, everyone pretending this was almost normal, because for the people who worked for Yu-Jun Han, it nearly was. Chloe sat in the small lounge adjoining his office, a cup of untouched barley tea going cold in her hands, and watched him work. She noticed things she'd trained herself not to notice anymore. The way he asked for information twice, once from the analyst, once independently verified by Min Ho, before accepting it as true. The way his questions kept circling back to timing. Who knew Chloe was coming here today? He asked, for the third time in 20 minutes. Min Ho hesitated. Her assistant, your calendar team, myself, obviously. A beat. Director O knew. He asked this morning whether Mrs. Han's visit was still confirmed for 11. Why would he ask that? Said he wanted to make sure conference room B was free. Min Ho's tone stayed neutral, but Chloe watched something flicker behind Yu-Jun's eyes, quick and gone. Sir, Director O's been with you almost 10 years. I don't think... I'm not accusing anyone. Yu-Jun's voice was even. Too even. I'm asking who had the information. That's a different question. But it wasn't. Not really. And Chloe understood that even as an outsider to this world, someone inside these walls had known her schedule down to the hour. Someone had known, apparently, exactly when to have a sniper in position. The threat that had felt external an hour ago, some faceless enemy from Yu-Jun's shadowy business, suddenly had a shape that lived much closer to home. A trusted executive, a senior guard, someone who smiled at her in the hallway, who'd sent flowers when her grandmother passed, who might, right now, be sitting 3 floors down pretending not to know anything at all. June, she said quietly, and this time she used the name that meant something else. If it's someone you trust, what does that mean for you? He didn't answer for a long moment. When he did, his voice had gone rougher than she'd heard it in years. It means I've been carrying a knife in my back and calling it a coat. It was Chloe, not Yu-Jun's security team, who found the file. Mostly by accident, mostly because she needed somewhere to put her hands while her mind refused to settle. She'd wandered into the small private study adjoining his office, looking for nothing in particular, and found his old laptop, the one he almost never used anymore, sitting open on standby. A password prompt blinked at her. On impulse, feeling faintly ridiculous, she typed the one thing she was fairly sure he'd never change, her birthday, followed by the name of the street they'd honeymooned on. It worked. She almost wished it hadn't. The folder was labeled, simply, C. Inside were hundreds of files, dates, cross-referenced against a second column she didn't understand at first, until she opened the first one, and her stomach dropped through the floor. April 14th, anniversary canceled, threat assessment, credible. 2 individuals matching description of Song Yun-woo's known associates spotted within 3 blocks of reserved restaurant. Advised C's route change. C not informed of reason. She scrolled. Her hands had gone cold. June 2, C's preferred bakery route altered without explanation. Surveillance confirmed unmarked vehicle parked outside for 11 consecutive days. September 9th, business trip to Busan extended by 72 hours. Real reason? Credible intelligence that a known enforcer for a rival network had traced C's grandmother's address. Situation neutralized without C's knowledge to avoid unnecessary distress. Every canceled plan, every sudden trip, every unexplained new guard, every avoided restaurant, every single thing she had quietly filed away as proof that her husband no longer loved her, laid out in cold, clinical language, each one a moment he had chosen her safety over his own comfort, and chosen silence over the risk of frightening her, or worse, the risk that telling her the truth might somehow put her in more danger. She was still sitting there, unmoving, when she found the second folder. This one wasn't security reports. This one was real estate documents, architectural plans, and, tucked behind them, a folder of paint swatches in soft yellows and greens. The kind you'd choose for a room that didn't exist yet. A property outside Paju, a vineyard, purchased 4 years ago, before they'd even married, under a shell company so quiet, not even Minho seemed to know about it. The floor plan showed a small house with a wraparound porch, and one room on the east side labeled, in Yu-Jun's careful handwriting, simply, for later. She was still staring at that when she heard him in the doorway. She didn't turn around right away. "You bought us a house 4 years ago," she said, "and designed a nursery in it, and never once mentioned it." His silence answered before he did. "I was going to tell you," he said finally. "I kept waiting for it to be safe enough to matter. It never was." She turned then, and the anger she expected to feel had transformed into something far harder to hold. Grief, mostly, for every year she'd spent believing the worst about a man who had apparently spent that same time quietly building a future he was too afraid to promise her out loud. "You let me think you didn't want children. I wanted them so much it terrified me." His voice cracked, just slightly, on the last word. "I couldn't bring a child into a life where I was already failing to keep his mother safe. You should have told me." "I know." He crossed the room and, for the first time all day, reached for her hand instead of a piece of security equipment. She let him take it. "I know, Chloe. I've known for a long time. I was a coward about the wrong thing," she realized, holding his hand in that small, quiet study with the smell of old paper and cold tea around them, that she had spent 3 years mourning a marriage that had never actually died. It had simply been speaking a language she'd never been given the key to. That didn't fix anything yet, but it cracked something open that had been sealed shut far longer than the building around them had been. The name arrived that evening, delivered by Minho with the particular stillness of a man about to detonate something he can't take back. Director Oh Tae-min, Yu-Jun's chief operations executive, the man who had stood at Yu-Jun's right hand through his father's funeral, through the wedding, through every closed-door negotiation for nearly a decade, the man Chloe had once cried in front of, the year her grandmother died, because he happened to be the one who found her in the hallway and sat with her until she stopped shaking. The evidence, once it surfaced, came fast and ugly. Encrypted messages, routed through a shell account, traced back to O's private terminal. Financial transfers to 2 of the men caught on camera the day of the lockdown. And buried in an old message thread, dated back nearly 2 years, a conversation with an unknown contact discussing, in careful, deniable language, how to create distance inside the Han marriage. It had been, not chance, not fate, who had quietly delayed the message Yu-Jun sent apologizing for their first missed anniversary, the one Chloe never received until 3 days later, cold and stripped of context. It had been who'd intercepted a gift Yu-Jun had arranged for her birthday 2 years ago, letting her believe he'd forgotten entirely. It had been using a burner account, who had sent Chloe 3 anonymous messages over the past year, each one carefully worded to plant doubt. Ask him where he really was last night. Ask him why the new guard started the same week as his trip to Macau. Some men keep more than one kind of family. None of it had been true. All of it had worked exactly as intended. "He wanted us broken," Yu-Jun said quietly, staring at the message thread like it belonged to a stranger. A united marriage is hard to manipulate. A lonely wife eventually leaves, and once you left, his voice caught, briefly, on the word, you'd have lost the protection that comes with the Han name. I wouldn't have had a legal reason to keep guarding you the way I have. He wanted me broken first. Then the company would have been easy. Chloe felt something in her chest go entirely still. He used me to get to you. He used both of us against each other. Yu-Jun set the tablet down like it had grown too heavy to hold. 10 years, Chloe. I trusted that man with things I've never told my own mother's memory. And the whole time, he was rewriting our marriage from the inside, one small cruelty at a time, so quietly neither of us noticed the pattern. Why didn't you catch it? You catch everything. Because I never imagined I'd need to protect us from someone standing that close. He looked at her, and for once there was no wall behind his eyes at all. That's the mistake that almost got you killed. Not loving you too carefully. Trusting the wrong man completely. It was Chuseok, of all days, when he finally told her the rest. Yu-Jun kept a small memorial table every year for his mother, quietly, without ceremony. Songpyeon made from her old recipe by the housekeeper, who'd learned it from her decades ago, a single photograph, a cup of tea he never drank but always poured. Chloe had known about the ritual, but had never been invited to sit with him for it. Tonight, sealed inside headquarters, with the investigation still unfolding around them, he asked her to sit anyway. "When I was 16, he said, eyes on the photograph, my mother was offered police protection after threats were made against our family. She refused it. She said she wanted one ordinary afternoon, just lunch, just us, no guards standing in the doorway pretending not to listen." His hands, folded in his lap, had gone very still. She got her ordinary afternoon. She didn't get another one after that. Chloe didn't say anything. She'd learned, finally, that his silences meant something and deserved room. Since then, I've believed that resting for even one day gets someone killed. That's why I never really came home, even when I was standing in our kitchen. Some part of me was always still working, still checking exits, because I decided a long time ago that relaxing was how you lost people. He finally looked at her. It wasn't about not loving you enough to be present. It was about loving you too much to risk what happens if I stop watching. That's not sustainable, June. That's not a marriage. That's a siege. I know that now. A breath. There's more. Something I should have told you years ago. He told her about her father. Marcus Taylor, Chloe learned that night, had crossed paths with a dying witness 15 years earlier. A man fleeing a criminal network with evidence that could unravel operations across 3 countries. Evidence he'd trusted to a stranger who'd simply stopped to help him on a bad night. Her father, without ever fully understanding what he'd been given, had kept that evidence hidden inside something so ordinary no one thought to look for it. An old family Bible, passed down through 3 generations, eventually inherited by Chloe after his sudden death when she was 11. Multiple syndicates have been hunting that evidence for over a decade, Yu-Jun said. When I met you in New York, I already knew who you were. I knew what your father might have left behind. Protecting you started as an assignment I chose to take, because I was the only one positioned to do it without exposing you to more danger than necessary. Chloe felt the ground shift again, a different kind of vertigo than the one from that morning. So none of it was real. You married an assignment. It started that way. His voice was low, urgent, unwilling to let that misunderstanding stand for even a second. Somewhere in New York, watching you get lost in your own excitement over bad street food, laughing at your own jokes before you even finished them, duty became something else. I fell in love with you, Chloe, and it terrified me more than any threat ever has, because now I had something I couldn't afford to lose. Everything I did after that, the distance, the secrecy, the silence, was me trying to protect the one thing that finally mattered more than the mission. She sat with that for a long time, the smell of pine-scented Songpyeon and old grief filling the quiet room. You should have told me I was in danger. You should have let me decide what risks I was willing to take. You're right. No defense, no deflection. I was so afraid of losing you to a bullet that I never considered I might lose you to silence instead. I was wrong about which danger was more likely to take you from me. For the first time since the papers hit his desk that morning, Chloe reached for his hand herself. They sat like that for a while, the memorial candle burning low beside the untouched cup of tea, and Chloe found herself asking the question she'd been circling for hours. If he'd never turned on you, would you have ever told me any of this? On your own? Without a gun pointed at the building? Yu-Jun was quiet long enough that she thought he might dodge it, the way he'd dodged so much for so long. Instead, he said, slowly, like the honesty cost him something physical to produce, I don't know. I'd like to say yes, but I built an entire life around the idea that carrying it alone was the loving thing to do. I'm not sure I would have recognized the moment to stop, if today hadn't forced it. That scares me more than the sniper did. It scares me too. He turned his cup of tea in slow half-circles, not drinking it, the way she now understood he never did. My mother taught me, without meaning to, that love and self-erasure were the same thing. I've spent 13 years proving her right, instead of proving her wrong. You could have told me that on our first date. The corner of his mouth moved, not quite a smile. You'd have run. Probably. She let herself laugh, quiet and a little wet at the edges. But I'd have run toward understanding you, not away from a stranger who kept disappearing on me. There's a difference, June. He nodded slowly, like he was writing the sentence down somewhere permanent. I'm learning that. Late. But I'm learning it. Outside the study, the building had gone strangely quiet. Most of the staff cleared to secure floors, the corridor lights dimmed to their overnight setting. For the first time in longer than either of them could easily name, the silence between them didn't feel like distance. It felt, almost, like rest. Director O's final move came just before midnight, when he understood the investigation had closed in far enough to end his freedom either way. He didn't run. He came in through his own credentials, calm as ever, and made a play for the one thing left that mattered, the evidence hidden inside the Bible Chloe had, hours earlier, finally handed to Yu-Jun's security team for safekeeping. 2 of O's men breached a service corridor on the 11th floor. Alarms tore through the building. Minho's team moved fast, but O himself walked straight toward Yu-Jun's office, with the eerie composure of a man who had spent a decade learning exactly how this building worked from the inside. You should have stayed on your side of the marriage, Han, O said, when he found them both in the study, a gun leveled with the same steady hand that had signed a decade of contracts at Yu-Jun's side. If you'd just let her leave when she wanted to, none of this would have been necessary. You'd have killed her the moment the papers were finalized, Yu-Jun said. His voice hadn't changed at all. Same stillness, same discipline, but Chloe could feel, standing beside him, exactly how much that calm was costing him now. Business, O said, almost gently. Nothing personal, Chloe. You were just standing in the way of something bigger than both of you. Chloe felt the old instinct rise in her, the instinct to freeze, to let the men in the room decide what happened to her life the way they always seemed to. She didn't listen to it. I stopped standing in anyone's way the second I found out what you did to us, she said, and her voice didn't shake. You spent 2 years making me believe my husband didn't love me. You don't get to call that business. It was Yu-Jun's private surveillance system, the very network Chloe had once resented as proof of his controlling nature, that gave them the opening. A camera O himself had installed years ago, in a blind spot even he had forgotten about, caught his men breaching the corridor in real time, feeding straight to Minho's team 2 floors down. Security converged before O could finish his sentence. The standoff ended, not with violence but with the quiet, humiliating click of his own weapon being taken from his hand by men who had, until that morning, called him director without hesitation. 10 years, Yu-Jun said, watching him restrained. His voice, for the first time all day, allowed itself to sound tired. I would have given you anything you asked for, honestly. O didn't answer. There wasn't an answer that would have mattered anymore. In the weeks that followed, Yu-Jun did something no one in the organization expected, least of all himself. He began dismantling the criminal architecture his father and grandfather had built, piece by piece, transferring legitimate holdings to trusted successors, severing ties that had defined the Han name for 2 generations. It wasn't a single dramatic gesture. It was closed-door meetings, difficult phone calls, and the slow, unglamorous work of choosing a different kind of future. You could have kept it all, Chloe told him one evening, watching him sign the last of the transfer documents in their kitchen instead of his office, for once. You didn't lose the empire. You're giving it away. I almost lost you inside it, he said simply. I spent my whole adult life believing power was how I kept people safe. It's how I nearly lost the only person I actually wanted to protect. I'd rather have less and keep you than have everything and keep losing you one silence at a time. She thought about the girl who used to write letters she never sent, 37 of them stacked in a drawer, each one a small, private grief she'd never spoken out loud. She didn't need to write them anymore. Weeks later, the office looked exactly the way it had that morning. Same desk, same view of Gangnam's sprawling gold and glass toward the horizon, same 2 chairs, facing each other across the same polished surface. Only one thing was different, and it was everything. Yu-Jun slid a folder across the desk toward her, the same unhurried motion he'd used the day the papers arrived. Chloe felt her stomach drop, old instinct rising fast. "More papers?" she said, and even she could hear the nervous laugh underneath the words. No. He didn't smile, the careful, controlled smile she'd grown used to over 3 complicated years. He smiled the one from New York, the one that used to get lost trying to find her apartment, the one that had made her fall for him in the first place. She opened the folder with hands that weren't quite steady. Not divorce papers, property deeds, the vineyard outside Paju, the house with the wraparound porch, the room on the east side that no longer needed a label that said for later, because later had finally, quietly arrived. "You already own it," she said softly. "I want it to be ours, on paper, out loud, no more secrets hiding as protection." He reached across the desk, the way he had that terrible morning weeks ago, except this time there was nothing left unspoken between them. "I locked every door in this building once, because I was afraid of losing you. I don't want to live like that anymore." Chloe reached for his hand. This time, when she did, he didn't let go. Months earlier, in this same office, he had sealed every exit because he was terrified of a world that had already taken so much from him. Now, the doors stood open, not because the danger was gone entirely, but because he'd finally learned that love couldn't survive behind locked doors, no matter how good the intentions were that put the locks there in the first place. Some kinds of safety, Chloe understood now, only work when you build them together, in the open, where the people you love can actually see you doing it. "I wrote this one because I wanted to sit inside that specific ache, loving someone so much you protect them right out of the room. Do you think Yu-Jun was wrong to keep the truth from her for so long, even knowing why he did it? And be honest, if you were Chloe, standing in that office with the doors sealing around you, would you have believed him, or would you have kept walking toward the divorce anyway? Let me know where you land on that one. If stories like this one, the quiet, cinematic, cross-cultural kind, are your thing, stay close. There's another one coming.